Gur MacGill, agus fáilte rih chuile den an teach. A bheithíl, agus elas cohilag Níl MacGill Fríide, Aspig, Ambassador Pools, agus Gachtainna Unadí Peblius, agus Listen, I'm glad to be back here in Glenties for a few reasons. This is the occasion of the annual pilgrimage to Croagh Patrick, the last Sunday in July, when people go and tramp their way to the top. It's also the occasion of the pilgrimage here to MacGill. And Joe, you've been at this for 4 decades or approximately, done an outstanding job. You've created an institution here which has put this place on the edge of the blue stacks on the map, and I think that's very important. It's just before the pilgrimage to Croagh Park, and we'll talk about that again. Just want you to know that we put back-to-back victories together. We're in the wrong place. In 2011, we took out the defending champions Cork in Croagh Park. In 2012, we took out the defending champions Dublin in Croagh Park. In 2013, we intend to take out the defending champions, but not so that anybody else can have it. This is the point where we stake our claim to immortality, having waited 62 years. I did say last year that I might have the opportunity to legislate for this if it wasn't going to work out right. And during the course of the presidency, one of those exquisite sculptors of words did prepare a bill for us on this called the Repatriation of Sam Maguire to its long lost destiny in the west of Ireland. But we hope for the best. Now, I know that I heard Jim McGuinness this evening, and my God, in the days of Anthony Malloy and the team, there was no pullback from Donegal on the football field, so I hope it all works out well for everybody anyway. So, I think your theme here, Joe, looking to 2016, how stands the Republic, is actually a very timely and opportune occasion to reflect on where it is that we stand, where we're headed, and what kind of shape we're going to be in by 2016. Res Publica, things of the Republic, things of the people, are all important. I think, that despite all the difficulties we've had in the past period, Ireland and its people have gone back in many ways to our traditional roots of understanding that when there's a problem, pragmatism and community effort kick in. I cannot speak more highly with the unfortunate series of events that have happened with the heavy rainfall in Letterkenny Hospital. I know that 500 people turned up there from all organisations and agencies to assist in this, because when something like that happens, it's an emergency. The news reports might not give the full extent of what's now having to be dealt with here. But when you consider that the records have been lost in part, that the MRI is gone, the diagnostics gone, the laboratories are gone, the walls are going to have to be stripped and decontaminated, that effectively Letterkenny in the northwest is out of commission for a number of months. And that's why Altnagelvin and Enniskillen and Sligo and all the communities around have been absolutely first class in their response to assist in this. This is an emergency situation, if you like, for a medical institution which is so important for the people of the northwest. And we have to see that because of the heavy rainfall, because of the surge of current and effluent that came from the stream close by, has destroyed in part a really first-class medical facility. And out of that occasion has come a really tremendous and powerful community response that needs to be replicated now by state response in restoring Letterkenny to its premier place among the best hospitals in the country. So in our republic, it's important to note that people do not forget, and that in times of difficulty and in times when assistance is required, it's always there. It's to open the doors for that assistance and to let it play its part is what's important. I'd like to say that in a few short months, this country will become the first to successfully exit a bailout programme. This has not been an easy process. It's going to be an important moment for this country for many reasons, not only for ourselves as a people, for our country, but also because to be a real republic, Ireland has to be a sovereign republic. Also sends out a signal to others, both within the Union and outside the Union, that our people and government have the courage and the realism to face very difficult problems, set out the strategy and plan that these things work. It's a good time, if you like, Joe, to reflect on the very painful steps that have had to be taken by government to retrieve our economic sovereignty, and the challenges that remain, and the changes that we need to make to ensure that our country will never again be put in this position. Never again be put in this position. On my election as Taoiseach, which was a great honour and privilege, I set out my own personal vision for Ireland by 2016. And I've said repeatedly that on so many occasions that as we approach the centenary of the date when those who rebelled and fought and died as our country took its first fledgling steps towards economic independence and political independence, that we should aspire to achieving three things. The first is to be recognised as being the best small country in the world in which to do business. The second, the best country in the world in which to raise a family. And thirdly, the best country in the world in which to grow old with a sense of dignity and a sense of respect. Government has been working hard in setting out the strategy to achieve these aims, which are not just theories or aspirations, but for me, there is no greater objective that you can have politically than to succeed in recreating a really vibrant republic for all our citizens. As Joe pointed out, the backdrop to this first half of 2013 was the European presidency. See, with 27, now 28 countries involved here, this was the most technically complex presidency of them all. It required preparation 6, 8, 12 months in advance, because negotiating both with the Council, which is the leaders of the different countries, and the councils of ministers, the European Parliament, which since the Lisbon Treaty has to give effect and imprimatur and its approval to the budget, and the European Commission, demanded an enormous amount of time, particularly from those diplomats and from those public servants whom you will never hear of, who worked all the hours that God made to put in place the requirements for political decisions to be made. So from that point of view, our seventh presidency began on the anniversary of joining what was then known as the European Economic Community. And we set out three pillars here: stability, growth and jobs. Just those three, because therein lies the solution to the problems of the European Union, the problems of Ireland, and our place, therefore, in the global community. And though we're a small country, as Ambassador Poels pointed out, and I was happy to work very closely with Prime Minister Helle Thorning-Schmidt from Denmark on these matters, Ireland has played a disproportionate part in building this union. And I say this while I criticise governments of the past. All governments that held the presidency of Ireland over the last 40 years did their damnedest to do it well and to do it effectively. But this was more complex and more difficult than before. So despite the fact that people said some of these things are impossible, one of the startling features across Europe is the fact of the phenomenon of the numbers of young people who have no employment, who have no work, who are left without hope, who are left with disillusionment and despair. I was in Spain speaking to the Prime Minister over there as part of the presidency. 57% of young people are unemployed. It's 60% in Greece. There are difficulties in so many other countries. And when you speak to the young people, they say, what are you doing in politics when you make decisions and don't follow them through? And one of the first things that I noticed at the European Council is a requirement for two basic essentials: trust and truth. And if they're absent from round any table, then business can never be done. And I'm glad to see that where we were in a position where decisions were being made that were not being followed through because people didn't actually believe in them, we're now in a position where, by example, from Ireland's perspective, as presidency, we've been able to bring everybody with us on a whole series of issues where that's an understood issue now, that if you make a decision, then that you go and follow it through. So during our presidency, We did deal with the common fisheries policy, with the common agricultural policy, Horizon 2020 dealing with innovation and research, put together a 6 to 8 billion fund for unemployment for young people, so that anybody who leaves the formal schooling system within 4 months or as short a time as possible can be offered an opportunity for apprenticeship, for training, for job opportunities, for upskilling or whatever. This is absolutely so important. We made major progress on very complex issues about banking union. Single supervisory mechanisms, Capital 4 directives, resolution and recovery, and putting in place the structure by which hopefully this can be dealt with next year when it happens, arising from the decision made on the 29th of June last year, where leaders said we break the link between sovereign and bank debt and go and prove it. Because that's important with the economic train crash that happened in our country just a number of years ago. That legacy issue is still to be dealt with. So the progress that we achieved during our presidency, I have to say, was good for the reputation of our people, good for the morale of the European Union, and created a new sense of integrity and credibility about Ireland. One of the largest employers in the world, with whom I met in America shortly after I was elected, and I said to him, what would you do if you were in my shoes? He said, the first thing you have to do is prove that you're serious. Prove that your people and your government are serious about what you're at. And that's been an essential focus of the actions of government with what we've been trying to do here. In the last 6 months, we've attempted to deal with a whole range of those issues. So when the government was elected, if you just think back 2.5 years, country economically was in free fall, public finances were out of control, banks were on the brink of collapse, nobody could get credit, employment was collapsing, the image of our country abroad was one of confusion, one of lack of cohesion, where our reputation, our integrity and our credibility were on the floor for a whole variety of reasons. So the immediate priority on being elected to government was to focus on the public finances, bring that situation under control, stabilise your banking system and rebuild our international reputation. It meant calling all our own ambassadors back from around the world and say we've got a new set of directions here. And calling in all the European ambassadors to say, I want you to understand that we're setting out on a course that's going to be serious here, where we attempt to set out to rectify this problem so that it won't happen again. And this has affected Donegal more than every other part of the country, in terms of small businesses, in terms of villages and parishes and towns where young people are in Darwin or in Brisbane or in San Francisco or wherever. And these are social impacts. I know they're different in the sense that communications is instant now, and from FaceTime to Twitter to all these communication systems. But nobody likes to leave unless they want to leave. And it's important that we set out the structure to try to rectify that. There's been some improvement in the situation insofar as employment is concerned. Now, for 3 years we lost 7,000 jobs every month in the private sector. 7,000 jobs gone every month, 250,000. They've stabilised that position. The private sector is now creating 2,000 jobs a month and rising. And that's, a sign of confidence, but it's a long, long way to go and a long, long way from where we need to be. Our construction sector is now contributing 6% of GDP. It used to be 24, 25, 26%. It's now too small. We've got to rebuild that, but rebuild it in a way that's effective, where the spend goes through the community and where it's controlled, and not like it was in the past. So while the unemployed numbers on the live register have dropped below 300,000, this is welcome, but we need to do so much more. And that's why we set out under my own department, working with the Department of Jobs, to say, let's set out the action plan for jobs here. You show me what it is that business in Donegal needs. You tell me where the Donegal employers, where the national people can say, here's an idea, here's an opportunity for a job. Free it up, cut the red tape, cut out the bureaucracy, and go and prove it. One of the things to demonstrate that was down in Waterford just a few weeks ago. I was down there with the Taoiseach, Minister Burton and Minister Bruton, where you used to have a situation, if somebody wanted to take on somebody off the live register, you'd get a complex system of a tax credit in retrospective. It was too complex, too red tape, too bureaucratic, and nobody bothered with it, or very few. So listening to employers, what government have now done is put a direct cash injection in there to help their cash flow. So somebody who's on the unemployed list here in Glenties for 12 months, if an employer takes them on, they get a direct injection of 7,500. If that person is out for 2 years, they get a direct injection of 10,000, which is simple, effective, and helps the cash flow. And we want to look at the live register not as a list of discarded, despondent people who simply go into an office and draw your tax money as their dole. I want to see a situation where those people are reckoned and understood to be people who want to work, the vast majority do, where they have experience, motivation, where they've got ambition, where they've got talent, but you have to identify it. So you have to change the whole nature of the way you look at that, and the way you engage with them, and the way you show them that there are opportunities that they can contribute to their local communities, local economy, and to the country as a consequence. Obviously, one of the major issues that confronted us was this whole business of the Anglo-Irish Bank promissory note arrangement. And that's been renegotiated, the replacement of IBRC and the promissory notes with a sustainable, more longer-term debt. And that means that there will no longer be the annual requirement to pay $3 billion every year as part of that promissory note arrangement. I opened a school down in Ballycroy in County Mayo very shortly after being elected. It cost €1 million. Site, buildings, a lot. Lovely. And the point was that you could build 3,000 of those every year for 10 years with what was going into the Anglo-Irish debt arrangement. Think of that for what you could do for your localities around the country. So the requirement to borrow 20 billion less over the next 10 years is a substantial improvement on the debt situation that pertained there. So that deal, if you like, has helped the government move forward a number of steps in preparation for exiting the Troika arrangement towards the end of this year. We also renegotiated a reduction in interest rates and a longer-term extension in terms of loan maturities, which was also given to Portugal, which helps our debt profile in the years ahead. So that improves international confidence, if you like, as we prepare to fly again on our own economically. So the requirement was also to make very difficult choices in sorting out our own public finances here, which you're all aware. Now, we had Croke Park 1, and when that came to sort of a conclusion, and a Croke Park 2 was put in place, that wasn't accepted and was voted down by some unions and accepted by others. And a rearrangement of that, which was led by Minister Howland, called the Haddington Road Agreement, has now been concluded and sends out a very big signal about industrial peace in this country for the next number of years, which is very different than has happened in other countries. And that's because people recognise in our country that if there's a problem, it's not going to go away until you fix it. And it can only be fixed by everybody working together in that sense. So the increased payroll savings coming from the Haddington Road Agreement will deliver €1 billion between here and 2015. And they will also deliver unprecedented changes in the way that the public sector delivers its services and organises them in respect of the taxpayer and the people. And that's an issue that I see already down the west immediately. For instance, in the hospital groupings, where before you had individualised contracted situations for each individual hospital, they now work in terms of groups, and it's going to be far better where specialists are contracted to the group and services are provided in a much more meaningful way when that structure becomes right. Now, I'd like to say, where stands the Republic? I mean, we're all understanding of the difficulties that we face, but I tell you, I just could never understand what it was about a government or governments that allowed situations to fester in the country here without dealing with them in a way that should have been done ages ago. Now, the Magdalene ladies went on for over 60 years, and no government dealt with this. None of them. So when we met with them in the beginning, the power of their delivery and the impact of what they said and how it impacted on their lives left you in a position of understanding that these people did not have time on their hands, have not the opportunity to go down a litigious public tribunal route for 15 years, out of which unknown might come. And that's why it was important in understanding that government led on the issue and decided on an effective, swift, speedy, non-litigious, non-adversarial process, which those people, the vast majority of them, are now in that process, and that the legacy of the laundries can be dealt with by understanding that governments can actually work in the people's interest here. Nor do I understand why it's been in a republic that many people have talked about in various shapes and shades over the years, why we left those who had to go through the brutality of symphysiotomy or the Lourdes situation, or any of these other socially impactful situations. When money was flowing into this country in billions, and when money was wasted in this country in billions, the kind of republic that I like to see is one that we can be proud of how we have dealt with unfortunate legacies, social, personal, economic, of the past. And I hope that following the meetings which Minister Riley is now undertaking with those women who were excluded from the Lourdes redress scheme and from the brutality of symphysiotomy, that these things can be brought to an acceptable conclusion in everybody's interests. So, in that sense, I think that's an important social stamp of the kind of government and kind of people that I know we are, and that when something is seen to be as fair as can be, that where these things happened, that we deal with them. I would also like to say that at the beginning of 2013, we also began the process of dealing with another issue that has been ignored for years by previous governments, and that was to provide legislation to give legal clarity as to the interventions that are permissible in the rare situations where there is a real and a substantial risk to the life of a mother during pregnancy. Believe you me, this was not an easy situation to deal with. And it was obviously sensitive, obviously complex, and that's why there were exhaustive hearings before Christmas, after Christmas, the opportunity during the course of the preparation of the headings of the bill, the discourse on the bill itself, and the resultant legislation clarifies and regulates existing constitutional rights enshrined in our Bunreacht na hÉireann by our people and endorsed on a second occasion. It does not create any new rights. In my view, it strikes the right balance between creating a rigorous process for assessing whether a termination of a pregnancy is the only treatment which would avert the real and substantial risk to a woman's life, while reiterating the obligation on medical professionals to preserve the life of the unborn child where that is practicable. It's been a difficult issue for very many people. It also contains a range of safeguards for the future. So I'm hopeful that the enactment of the legislation will provide the clarity that is needed in order to protect the lives of both women as mothers and of their unborn children. So now we face the second half of this government heading into September 2013. First major item is going to be the budget on the 15th of October. Why is it on the 15th of October? It's because of the European semester and the agreement that budgets should be held before or by the 15th of October. That's bringing it forward a few weeks, which I think in the eyes of business is a good thing. But it also means that you have to make your decisions in a sharper way and with a more deliberate focus. So the budget for next year, for 2014, will be driven now by two key objectives. That's to continue the necessary correction in our public finances and to continue to invest in and to incentivise work and employment. Therein lies the key. So, I appreciate that the measures that we've taken today to close the gap between revenue and spending have been very difficult and very painful for hundreds of thousands of people. Very difficult. But we're still adding £1 billion per month to that bill, and that's unsustainable. And we've got to deal with it, because nobody else is going to deal with it for us. We have to deal with this ourselves. So this budget for 2014 is, in my view, the opportunity to take the last steps to deal with this, and that we won't have this pressure on us all the time. Because I know that people are fatigued by the austerity word and by the pressure that's on them. Of course they are. Everybody knows this. So we agreed on targets for the budget. And so therefore it's necessary that we stick to those targets to exit the programme by the end of the year. Because failure to do so, after all the hard work and after all the sacrifices, would leave the Irish people now so close to the exit of the bailout and would jeopardise everything that we have all worked for. And we can't allow that to happen, because the people, quite rightly, would never forgive us for so doing if we falter and fall at the last fence. 90% of this fiscal consolidation is now completed, and we do not want to shirk our responsibility or fall back from the progress that we have gained. So any short-term relief, if you like, from backing off of deficit targets here would have an impact on jobs and employment. And for me, that's the key to this. Let me tell you, the pipeline into the country is very strong. I know this because I meet people from the United States and other places around the world on a regular basis. After the G8, we had Prime Minister Abe from Japan came down to see us. First time a Japanese Prime Minister ever came to the Republic. I also had Prime Minister Stephen Harper from Canada call, and you're aware, of course, that now Premier Xi Jinping called when he was Vice President on his way back from Washington 2 years ago. We've signed agreements with these governments, and they want to invest and work with Ireland and through Ireland to Europe, because they now recognise that our young people have creativity, imaginative capacity, and the potential for competency at a very high level, and they're anxious to be involved in that. And they see us internationally as a small country moving up from 24th in the list of competitiveness rankings to 20th now, and steadily moving up that ladder. So last week I was down in Stephen's Green there, and we launched. We reported on three small things that are important here for Donegal. I'll tell you why. Terry Clune is an entrepreneur. He did the tax-back scheme a number of years ago. He came in to me 2 years ago and said, look, I've got an idea. This idea was very simple. He said, look, we have Irish people working for firms all over the world. Ambassador Poots referred to our 70 million people around the world. We're going to tie all those together digitally after September, when the World Economic Forum takes place in Dublin. But he said, look, we have people from Donegal, for instance. They're working in Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, London, Birmingham, China, Australia. And some of the firms they work for don't know anything about Ireland, and they've never heard of Ireland. So the point was, if any of those firms or companies are going to invest in Europe, that we should tell them, well, why don't you consider Ireland in that context? So we set up a structure with the IDA and called Connect Ireland. And last week we announced 3 investments. And they're small, but they're important. One was for 50 jobs down in Port Harlington. In Port Harlington, Coolan Tudra, if you pass up on the train, is a sign, Coolan Tudra. 50 jobs there. 10 more from a European software company in Longford, and 10 more dealing with the oil and gas business down in Kinvara, County Clare. Now think about that. If you could replicate that 100 times around the country, in Bunclody or in Buttevant or wherever you like, in Donegal, in Fintown, 10, 15 jobs in places like that are the equivalent of hundreds in bigger cities. So whether you're a chief executive or a receptionist, You have an opportunity with your people from Donegal, and God knows no more than Mayo, your emigrant numbers are very extensive. But they should be told, if you're Irish anywhere in the world and there's a firm investing in Europe, they should look at Ireland, because that means jobs and employment and opportunities for young people here. So we're sitting down with ministers at the moment, talking about their ceilings for their departments. That will work itself out during the course of the next number of weeks. And the real business of the budget will start in September, because the information insofar as growth projections for next year and the figures coming in terms of revenue and income and all of that will begin to flow, so that government will be properly informed about the decisions that it must make. So when you hear the debates about the targets being set, our target is to have our deficit below 3% by 2015. The target for next year is 5.13%. The question is, what do you have to do in adjustment terms to reach that? Now, there is a figure of 3.1 billion mentioned in the Memorandum of Understanding. It's also mentioned in the Fiscal Stability Programme, part of the European semester. So these are issues that will be negotiated on the basis of information and relevant facts being available in September, towards the end of September, as that information flows through. But we intend to meet our targets, because it's very important that when we exit this programme, that there be a backstop, and that we also be able to deal with the question of the economic train crash, which happened a number of years ago, where people in this country were required to borrow 64 billion, and our citizens expected to pay it back. And that's why we've had to make those very difficult choices, but also get agreement from the Europeans on a range of other things there. So, in respect of all that job creation, pathways to work, I told you about the live register, how we treat it differently. And I might say, down in Sligo, we opened the first of what we call the intro offices. These were the old social welfare offices, where people went in, signed on, and walked away. Now it's different. They're now called intro, not in through, but intro, T-R-E-O. So what you do is you interview the people in groups who are on the live register. What's your name? What's your background? What's your experience? What do you work at? What do you want to do? What's your ambition? And you point out to them, what are the opportunities? So you motivate people. Example, I went into a MAB's office some time ago. I rang him at an appointment with the two ladies who run it to talk about the kinds of problems that they're getting in from people. But when I went in, the gentleman at the desk outside was very excited and presented himself very well and explained where the offices were. He was somebody who was on the TOOS programme. Come off the unemployment list, he was only getting 20-25 euro extra a week. But the change in his personality and his demeanour and his presentation was astounding, because he was making a contribution, and he could feel that contribution, and it was very important that there be the opportunity to do that. The other issue that I want to say is that the banking sector has got to stand up to its responsibilities in the Irish economy by meeting the needs of businesses and homeowners alike. Now, I expect that the covered banks will meet the lending targets that have been set for them. I expect them to further expand lending next year so that businesses can have access to credit and that they can thrive. And a particular priority has to be that viable businesses struggling with the legacy debts to grow and invest their way back to financial health have to be helped. Now, there are 95,000 distressed mortgages out there. These are not going to be sorted out just by waving a wand. Nor will they be sorted out by somebody on a telephone at the far end of a line in Dublin or somewhere else, just saying, well, this is the situation. This requires face-to-face contact and knowledge of the circumstances and background of cases. And that's why I expect that the banks, who have now trained their personnel, will see to it that there is direct contact with clients who are in distress with their mortgages, and that solutions can be worked out that are not merely just putting it on interest only for another 5 or 6 years, where the principal is not attacked or ever reduced. And think of the psychological benefit of getting so many of these people back into contributing to our economy and our economic well-being. And that requires face-to-face contact from the banks, and I expect them to do that. As I said, with the scale of the challenge of cleaning up what we inherited here, the reforms that are needed are very clear to prevent the mistakes of the past recurring. We did say that we would lead a programme of reform, and that's what we're going to do. We've abolished, effectively, corporate donations for political parties. We've set about a major reform of the Dáil and the question of the abolition of the Seanad, the most radical transformation of local government in over 100 years, the establishment of a constitutional convention to review the country's supreme law and to represent the biggest package of political reform since passing our constitution since 1937. So the next Dáil will have a smaller number of TDs. We've increased the number of Dáil sitting days. We've reduced the pay and the pension and the allowances of all politicians, starting with the office that I hold. We've halved the cost of ministerial transport. We're already radically streamlining local government, which will reduce the number of local authorities from 114 to 31, and the number of councillors from 1,600 to 950. But I still believe we can do so much better. Now, I came here 4 years ago to MacGill, and I said at that time that I was considering a reform of Seanad Éireann. And I did consider that. And the more I looked at it, the more I considered that it couldn't be reformed. Because you either ended up with one of two things: a minority discriminatory body, or something akin to the Dáil. The constitutional responsibility for holding the executive to account, which is very fundamental to a republic and to a democracy, rests with Dáil Éireann, not with Seanad Éireann. The Seanad has never been a second house. It's been a break on the proceedings of the Dáil. And my view, after having had many years' experience of this, is that it's the time to ask the people the question. I'm going to ask the people the question. We've had 10, 11 reports. I'm amused at all the speakers I hear coming out saying, "Oh, you must hold on to the Seanad. This is a wonderful institution with brilliant people." Of course. And we've had many brilliant people in the Seanad. And I have very many good friends in previous Seanad and in the current Seanad. But in terms of transparency, accountability and effectiveness, I want to see the House of Parliament, elected directly by the people, function as it should. That committees be given the authority and the resources to call in experts, to call in opinion makers, organisations, individuals, agencies and whatever, and have a much more thorough, much more comprehensive, much more broad spread of analysing how legislation is prepared, how it's debated, and how there's a discussion before it's ever enacted to see was there anything that was missed. And in that sense, the people of the country will have their say on the 4th of October. And my view, and I hope to be able to demonstrate this in the time ahead, is that we can have a really effective unicameral system where those who are elected by the people are answerable to the people, and through their influence, that the government that's elected is also answerable to that Dáil, because that's what's contained in your constitution, in our Bunreacht na hÉireann. So the Irish Constitution declares that the people are sovereign. And what could be more democratic? What could be more sovereign than to ask all of you and every other citizen who's entitled to vote in this republic, do you consider that we should continue to have a Seanad or not? Do you agree that it should be abolished? And it's a yes or no. In my view, with the programme that we set out for the more effective running of the time of the Dáil and the resources of the Dáil, the people will not lose. I see different people giving their contributions on the Seanad. And when I went to the Seanad myself to address the senators, I said, well, you know, it's not in my hands, the fate and the future of the Senate is in the hands of the people, where it should be. And the people, as I committed to them in the beginning, will have the opportunity to have their say. Just as an aside on that, when people say to me, why wasn't this referred to the Constitutional Convention? The reason is, the Constitutional Convention is a forum of politicians and the people. 66 private citizens selected properly, and 33 public representatives and a chairman. So it's a recommending body, and they make recommendations as to what the government should or might do. Reduction in the age of eligibility to stand for the presidency, reduction or not in the period of service of the presidency, reduction in the voting age to 16 or 17. Do you think these are important issues? The question in the second Constitutional Convention report was dealing with the issues of greater involvement of women in politics and some of the changes that are occurring there. Questions like whether you agree with the issue of gay marriage or not. These are recommendations that have been made by the Constitutional Convention. But in the case of the Shannon, both the parties to government, the Fine Gael party and the Labour Party, had already decided, we'd made a decision at government level. And this is a question we will ask the people. So we didn't actually need a recommendation on that from the Constitution, whatever the Convention, whatever they might want to do, already decided. So in that sense, the 4th of October will be an important date. I also want you to understand that don't lose sight of this, because in May 2009, it was recommended to the last government that the Constitution should be amended to allow for what they call a court of appeal that would deal with both civil and criminal appeals. Now, that was to address the huge backlog that has arisen in the Supreme Court, where if you want your case to be heard there now, it's taking over 4 years to deal with it. That wasn't always the way, but it's now extended to a point where it's virtually impossible to get a case heard without going through that period. So the people are going to be asked, will you give the government authorisation to set up a new court of appeal that would allow for the dealing with many of those backlogs to be taken to a new court, which would speed up the process, make it more efficient, more effective and more transparent. And we would say that that's an issue that people should vote yes on, and we will promote that strongly from our own point of view. I'm nearly finished, Joe. As I said at the outset, the remainder of 2013 now will be pivotal to the development of this republic. There are crucial economic and crucial constitutional decisions will be faced. They will determine how we retrieve our economic sovereignty, and they will continue the reforms that are needed to ensure that this never happens again. So, as we approach the end of this year, I actually feel it within myself that we face a future that is much brighter once we cross the last hurdle up ahead of us. We know where the high ground is. And for me, that high ground is building a republic that is transparent, that is accountable, that is run effectively, but that it's all about the opportunities for the people. Let me say, I've never been more proud to see young people from this country, all over the world, stand on any stage with their peers and more than hold their own. One company last week rang me and said, we got 4 calls internationally in the space of a week, asking if Ireland could put together a team of competent young people to deliver product X or Y. I think that's something that we should all be very proud of. I have to say, the same republic doesn't make me feel very proud when I see and read reports of some young people, a minority, comatose with drink at weekends, which doesn't do any good for anybody. And that's an issue that we need to address culturally, socially, educationally, and in so many other ways. But for me, as somebody who's been in politics a long time, it's a great privilege to head a government that is not afraid to face the challenges that our people face. Because the government is only there by the mandate and the will and the vote of the people. In due course, in 2016, in the spring of 2016, almost at the very last day of the constitutional remit, the people of Ireland can judge us on our programme, whether we've implemented it or not. I look forward to 2016, Joe. I really do. I'd like to think that government can leave behind a legacy of pride here, that if those leaders were to come back, that despite all the troughs, the ups and the downs, that we've weathered those storms, but we put in place a situation where this will not happen again. I was in Cork recently. An elderly man walked up to me, and I know that this is because of his faith. And he said, I have lived in your country for 70 years. And he said, I will now die happy because I now know that I do live in a republic. And I want to see that republic strengthen in the minds and the hearts of the people. And that as time goes on, and whenever the history books are written, that this period will be proven to be a watershed in the way the Irish people responded to an unprecedented economic crisis, and in the way the Irish people showed the way again, not just in our own country, but in a global sense. Now, the fighting Irish have not gone away, and politically and together, government and people, let's roll up the sleeves for the last hurdle. Let's get out of this, and we can approach 2016 where we can say we will release all the military archives online, we will restore Kilmainham Courthouse, we will put a proper interpretive centre into the GPO, and if the Bank of Ireland are willing, hand over the bank in James Street, and we'll do something very fitting with that too in respect of our people. So next Sunday I hope to see you all in Donegal. Those from outside these two counties can stay neutral, because as I said, I have two flags outside the house, but my heart, of course, is where I was born. Last year, I had to stand down beside the Donegal lads when they were receiving Sam Maguire, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry or grimace or grin or whatever else. In any event, I hope that next Sunday, on the wide open spaces of Croke Park, both teams, the red and green and the green and gold, will give a display of what is best about Gaelic football in the true traditions of connection, contact between both our counties, and may the best team win. Thank you very much indeed.